Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan McGuire, and I'm Manager of Professional Development at ACCE, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's webinar. Today we'll hear from our own Chris Mead, ACCE Senior Vice President, and two of your Chamber colleagues, Candace Boothby and Robert Height, on what it takes for a Chamber to turn itself inside and out to grow and prosper. Chris will facilitate a discussion on beyond the norm Chamber activity that will educate and inspire all of you. Before I turn the program over to our panel, we do have a few housekeeping notes. First, attendees are in listen-only mode during the webinar to avoid background noise. Second, after the presentation, we will have time for questions, which you can ask by using the question function of the webinar. The question box is on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in your question, and we will read the question to Candace and Robert. If we run out of time and don't get to your question, or if you have a question that you would prefer to discuss with us individually offline, please feel free to contact our panelists directly. Their contact information will be included on the presentation. That's the last slide. We're also happy to get in touch with you afterwards, after the webinar. Third, this webinar is being recorded, and it should be up on the ACC website on the ACC University webpage by Monday. So that would be 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, May 8th, Monday, May 8th. The presentation slides for the webinar are uploaded to the webinar panel that you'll see on the right of your screen. Scroll down to where it says handouts and click on the document to download it. If you prefer to wait until after the webinar to download the presentation, that's no problem. The presentation will be posted along with the webinar recording. So with all of that, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Candace Boothby is the President and CEO of the Noonan-Coweta Chamber, a position she has held for the last 12 years. Candace is known for her high energy and innovative approach to organization management, traits which assisted her in developing such chamber programs as Vision 2020, Entrepreneurs Thrive in Coweta, Network from Sunup to Sundown, Discovery Coweta, and the multi-year Prosperity's Front Door Community Marketing and Branding Program, among others. Candace's ongoing commitment to excellence resulted in her chambers receiving a 5-star accreditation from the U.S. Chamber in 2013 and ACCE's Chamber of the Year Award in 2015, the first chamber in Georgia to receive the Chamber of the Year designation. Professionally, Candace received her accreditation in public relations in 2002, graduated from the Institute of Organization Management in 2005, received her Georgia Certified Chamber Executive recognition in 2007, and the Certified Chamber Executive, or CCE, designation in 2013. Candace was the chair of the Georgia Association of Chamber of Commerce in 2013 to 2014, and currently serves on the ACC Board of Directors. Robert Height is the President and CEO of the Glendale, Arizona Chamber of Commerce. His chamber career began at the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce as the Director of Membership and Community Relations, a position he held for more than 7 years. Robert then relocated to Austin, Texas, and assumed the role of COO and Senior Vice President, where he continued to reside for nearly 5 years. After leaving Austin, Robert moved northeast, where he became the CEO of the Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce just outside Boston. His most recent transition was in October 2013, when he assumed the role of President and CEO of the Glendale Chamber of Commerce. Robert previously served in the U.S. Air Force and worked in the casino industry with both Mirage Resorts and the Venetian, heading up casino and event marketing prior to his chamber career. A graduate of the WACE Academy, class of 2008, Robert currently serves on the WACE Board of Directors, Membership Committee, and the FBI Board for ACCE. He's a member of the ACCE Emerging Cities Leadership Group and serves as Chair of the West Valley Chambers Alliance and Vice Chair for the Arizona Chamber Executive. Finally, Chris Mead is Senior Vice President of ACCE and is responsible for sponsorship, advertising, membership, and development. He's initiated ACCE projects such as Economic and Community Development Division, the Shapiro Group Study on the Value of Being a Chamber Member, Overseas Tours, and Certificate of Origin activities. Chris has been with ACCE since November 2002. His previous experience includes serving as Vice President of the Council for Urban Economic Development, now the International Economic Development Council. He's author of A History of the Chambers of Commerce called The Magicians of Main Street, The Story of Chambers of Commerce in America, 1768 to 1945. An epilogue to the book takes the story up to today. The book was published in 2014 and is available on Amazon and the ACCE bookstore. Chris lives in Oakton, Virginia, and is married to Laura Lewis Mead and has 2 daughters and a son. So welcome, Candace, Robert, and Chris. Thank you all for being with us today, and I will now pass the baton over to Chris.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming aboard this webinar. I hope it lives up to Susan's billing just now. We'll do our best. Tales of Renewal, some of you may recognize that title. It was the name of an article we had in a recent issue of the Chamber Executive Magazine, talking about a few people who had really turned things around and really made things happen at their chambers. Part of this is to show that that there's nothing inevitable about the kinds of membership losses that some have experienced because of health insurance changes and other kinds of changes, competition, things in the market. Some people have figured out ways to swim upstream, shall we say, and have very powerful, very exciting chambers. So we'll hear from 2 of the people who were featured in that article, although many others could have been included. And I think you'll come away from this with a sense that the things that they are doing you can do, and that we're right in the middle of a very exciting time of change in the chamber field. Incidentally, just one quick aside, in Nashville at the ACCE convention, there is going to be an extra helping of information on revenue for chambers. So you can get a deeper dive there. There will be 3 sessions on sponsorship alone, plus there must be at least a dozen sessions having to do with membership growth. So all of that I encourage you to think about. But today, let's dig into this and have some fun with some of the people and some of the ideas that are really propelling successful chambers. First of all, slide. This was mentioned in the article, but it's people who are really good at renewals, and chamber renewal rates tend to be better than the average nonprofit's renewal rates, according to at least the circumstantial information I've been able to come by. Our average renewal rate in our dynamic chamber benchmarking is about 86%, which is not bad. Look at that number, 97% or higher rates. These are not easy anywhere, but they generally tend to happen in smaller communities. But how about that? 97, 98%. Moscow, Idaho. Gina Terusio is still in that community in a different job. And then Jackie Krozak from Alpena, Michigan. And Jackie tells me that the secrets for her success there are personal outreach. She's always reaching out to those members and doing things for them, and then telling them again and again and again that her chamber has done those things for them. You know, we helped you with fix that sign ordinance so that you could have the sign the way you wanted it, and now you've sold more pizza. Remember that? That sort of thing. Hundreds of chambers are above 90%. So chambers do not, I think, really have a renewals issue. They're doing pretty well in it. If they have issues, it's in other areas. But here, it's looking good. Next slide, please. New membership sales. Now, this is kind of an aside, but it's interesting to me. You've all heard of these membership drives or membership events where a bunch of volunteers come into a room, and often they're harangued by a guy in a red suit who sometimes makes people do push-ups when they're talking. Jimmy Cusano is his name, and you've heard of that group. Maybe it's your chamber connection, but other people do it too. There are other companies that do it. But for some reason, the records have been going through the roof lately. See Tyler, Texas, with 900, more than 900 new members in a weekend. Granted, some of their memberships are individual, so it's like $120 or so for some of those individual memberships. Still, that's a lot of memberships in one weekend. San Antonio, Texas. The previous record for cash membership, and this is not sponsorship, this is membership. Cash memberships raised by your Chamber Connection was just under $300,000. Well, look at that. $500,000 in 3 days. So they broke it by what? 67%, something like that. Extraordinary. And then there's been some work, some advancement in the retention of the people, the kind of people that come in on these types of campaigns. Tyler now has a higher than 50% renewal rate, partly because it does things like business expo for new members and putting them on committees. San Antonio has its own process, I'm told. I haven't seen it, and they also have a very high renewal rate for their new members obtained by these kinds of membership events. Fort Collins, which is not, by the way, a user of your Chamber Connection, has a total resource campaign, but part of that is membership. And they have, I think their renewal rate is now about 60%, because, or one of the main reasons is they give their volunteers extra points when they get them in for the second year. So here's an example of a few chambers. Again, this is from that article that have really, done, I think, a great job. You can see the numbers here. Every single one of them has improved. Now, April Wares in the Livingston Parish Chamber of Commerce in Louisiana had an issue at our Savannah conference last year when, as she came back on her airplane, her chamber was literally underwater. It was filling up with water from the heavy rains. But they've managed to turn that around, and I think her budget now is probably equal to or exceeding what it was in 2014. Sevierville Chamber, Brenda McCroskey, look at that. From about $400,000 to $4 million. Not a bad increase. That's mostly tourism, but it was because the chamber had proved to the city that it could handle the tourism money and do a great job bringing in greater tax revenue for the city. Anyway, all of these people, you're welcome to contact. I mean, they're easy to find. Just Google their chamber and call them up. Ask them how they did it. You'll see a little more detail in Chamber Executive Magazine also on how they did it in that article on Tales for Renewal. Next slide. Today, you can see our two stars, Candace and Robert. You've already heard their bios. These people, and you can see their numbers there as well. Very impressive. And let's dig into what they did, how they did it, and think to yourself, okay, how am I going to do that? What can I do that can approximate what these individuals have done at their chambers? So now, if I may, let's turn it over to Candace. Candace?
Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much. So I'm really excited to share our story with everyone here today. And I think one of the things I just wanted to share up front is there's really no magic to the stuff that we're going to talk about. It really is something anybody can do. For us, our story really is about understanding who we were, identifying some of our weaknesses, closing our gaps, being very methodical and systematic in how we did that, and creating a new culture that people wanted to be a part of. So I'm just going to tell you our story, and I'm going to go back from my beginning, which was 2003, and I'm going to tell you a story about when I interviewed. And I asked the question at the interview, what is the chamber respected? Is it at the table? And nobody would look at me, and there were probably 10 people in the room, no eye contact. Finally, one guy looked at me and he said, well, okay, we're at the table, but we're at the kiddie table. And then everybody sort of chuckled, and I thought, okay, well, that's good. So a year goes by, and I called him up after I'd had time to listen, learn, observe, do all those things. And I called him up, and I said, hey, Joe, you remember that question you asked in the interview? that I asked and you answered about we're at the kiddie table, I said, well, I got to disagree with you. I said, I can't find a table. There is no table, much less the kiddie table. And that for us was a little bit of an aha moment that we had an opportunity to create the table that didn't even exist or that we couldn't figure out that it existed. So our town is about 25 miles south of Atlanta, Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. And we have about 140,000 countywide, and in Noonan proper, about 37,000. So back in 2003, as we were looking around and trying to figure out how do we move this thing forward, because we weren't getting a lot of excitement at our programs. Obviously, we weren't at the table. We weren't influencing. We weren't having that impact on the meaningful things that we knew that we should have impact on. So we brought in a consultant, very talented consultant, and she did a series of focus groups with members and non-members over about a month time frame. And she came back to us, and we were wanting to convert to tiered dues back in 2003. And she said, and it would have been to her benefit to recommend that we do this, so she would have made more money. She said to us, I'm going to recommend that you not convert to tiered dues. In fact, you really need to take the next couple of years and you need to realign your mission. You need to figure out who you are. You need to probably take some things off your plate. You need to work on your programming, and you need to start marketing yourself and telling your story. In a few years, when more people have moved in and you start seeing some of the changes, you will start hearing people say, what's in it for me and where's the value added? She says, until you hear those two questions, you're not ready to convert to the tiered dues. So we took that very seriously, and we did some things where one of my chairs, oh, and by the way, Susan, you can go ahead. Yes, thank you. We came up with the term gifting. So we had 5 events that had been with the Chamber for many years. And we decided when we realigned our mission, and our new mission statement was to champion economic prosperity for the members, that these 5 things didn't fit our mission. And they were great activities. They didn't need to leave the community, but we didn't need to own them. So we gifted our Star Student program that we'd had since 1947 to the Rotary Club. We gifted the Citizen of the Year to the Kiwanis Club. We gifted the bike ride to the Adult Literacy Program. We gifted the road race that we'd had for almost 30 years to Main Street. And then we had a public safety appreciation event that we gifted to the local community foundation. So we found a home for those places. And then what it did is it created room for us by clearing our plate, so that now that we have this redefined mission, we could actually start focusing on other things. And the first thing we started looking at then was, what does our program look like? What are we doing to support our members? How are we creating value? And we decided at that point, not only did we need to become mission focused, but we needed to be a needs driven organization. So this about 2004, 2005, about this time. And we had actually done a dues realignment where we looked at all of our members and we looked at what they were paying. And we said, we're just going to do a $50 across the board increase at this point. And we ran our numbers, and it was real interesting. I got just the right people involved to help the smart people to run those numbers. And they said, okay, if you do this, you're going to have 25% attrition, but a 30% net increase in revenue 1 year from today. And the most shocking thing was 1 year later, that's exactly what we had, because they had done such a good job running those numbers. Right in the midst of all of this, we have a local community hospital that Piedmont Healthcare that's in Atlanta was interested in purchasing. But there was also another group called the Hospital Task Force on the east side of the interstate, which the hospital is on the west side of the interstate, that wanted to bring in Emory to purchase our hospital. It got very ugly. It got very contentious. It was like fighting the Civil War is how people compared it. Families were all broken over this, and it was an opportunity for the Chamber to say, hey, we would be happy to mediate that situation. So we ended up being able to do that. And this was a tipping point for our Chamber board, because they developed a process in how you vet an issue. And we did it very objectively. We did it over several weeks in the evening with each of the parties that were involved. And at the end of it, we decided we would then discuss it and make a decision, but we wouldn't discuss it in between. At the end of the process, the board discussed it. They said, we think the best thing is for Piedmont to purchase our hospital, and we're going to come out with that statement, which we then put out a white paper the next day. And what was so interesting, within a few days, the hospital task force went away. Piedmont then started the process to purchase our hospital, and the board realized the value in our ability to leverage leadership in this community. They'd never really done it at that level, and they realized that that voice can be used to create magic. So one of the reasons I gave you that example is because when you fast forward now to 2017, and that was about 12 years ago, we've had 3 brand new hospitals open in the last 5 years, and we have a 4th one that we're working through the Certificate of Need process. And if you had asked me 5 or 6 years ago, would Newnan, Georgia have a brand new state-of-the-art community hospital? Would the Cancer Treatment Centers of America open their Southeastern hospital, and would we have a rehab hospital? I would say, wow, that's, probably not. But the leadership that the chamber showed and what they did demonstrated to the members the value of the voice that we created. So that was a tipping point in how we were redefining ourselves, while at the same time we were recreating our other programs and taking the things off of our plate. So go ahead to the next slide. So a lot of people don't always understand this culture that we've created. And so if you have questions, feel free to contact me. And what I'm going to describe to you won't work for everybody. Some people get it and some people don't. But we use the environment, the chamber, as a laboratory to try stuff, to have the freedom to break stuff, to make mistakes. I've always been very grateful that we have board leadership that isn't looking over our shoulder and encourages innovation. So what the entrepreneurial culture looked like for us is, and we've all experienced this, if you're in a chamber where it's open and there's people in and out all the time, and people walk in and they always expect to see you and you have to be available, and that's great, but it doesn't lend itself to productivity. You can't get the job done. You can't focus on moving your organization to the next level. So we recreated our environment to an entrepreneurial environment where we encourage people to work at their home office if that was more productive. We did outsourcing. For many years, I outsourced most of my staff functions. It saved us money. It allowed us to hire skill sets. There are things you have to do to still follow the IRS and 30 rules they've set up, but it gave us the ability to focus on things without being distracted. Me personally, this has been 10 years now that we've been doing this process. I work from my home office at least 2 days a week when I am ready to work on my projects and my substantive admin things that I need to do. Or the 3rd week of the month, we call it our NAT week, G-N-A-T. We don't schedule meetings. That's the week we work on the business, not in the business. That's our strategy week. That's the week we think, we dream, we plan. And some of these tools, you have to implement them through, sheer force of will. And then we implemented a lot of systems. We actually have a staff process handbook where we've defined a process for everything we do. So it doesn't matter who comes and goes. You pick up the book, you know where to start. And it saves time in the long run. So we try to be as strategic as possible with all of our systems to drive what we're doing. And we do a lot of remote stuff. And we just, if somebody needs to be in the office more, that's great. We have ways in which we communicate with each other and hold each other accountable. And for me, at least, I don't manage how they do the work. I manage to the bottom line and the results that you get. Now, obviously, you got to be following some of the systems and the processes, or it's not going to work. But it's the freedom and the liberty that people have to create their work environment that has worked for us. And we started it with baby steps. We started having meetings in coffee houses, in people's homes, in other places around town, so that we would take the focus off of it's a building, and it's not the building, it's the people. And then we started being very transparent with the board throughout the whole process. Everybody knows how we do our work environment. If you want to know more about that, let me know. So Susan, next slide. So we have a fellow on the board who runs a meat packing plant, one of our key leaders, who talks about it's all about the meat. And it is all about the meat. It's about the substance and the product that you produce, but at the same time, it's about the sizzle and the aroma that you were creating to go with the meat. So we spent a long time on the sizzle and the aroma, trying to figure out how do we make things exciting. People in the early days said our after hours were boring and we'd only get 20 people. So we tried something called Mystery in the Boardroom, where we hired a mystery writer, and you had to come in, and it was forced networking. You were given a role, and you had to find the clues in order to win the prize. We did that for a while. We started theming things. If you hosted something, you had to theme it, like, you know, Summer Sizzlin' or Winter Wonderland or Pirates of the Caribbean or something of that nature. We also did, in order to start creating our advocacy agenda, a series of what we called our Smart Growth bus trips, where we put people from, we have 8 different municipalities on a small bus. It kind of looked like a tricked out bordello bus that we borrowed from a member, and put them with business people from around the community to show them alternate forms of development patterns across the Atlanta metro area. We partnered with our county on their comp plan on something called Be Something Different. What do we want to look like in 20 years? We painted the picture. The newspaper worked with us, and we got about 7% of our local citizens to take the survey. And we just kept trying to reinvent things. We formed our Economic Prosperity Council, which is a public-private collection of leaders in the community where we focus on growth issues and topics. And we've been doing that now for about 6 years, and we do it quarterly, and it's been one of the best things we've done to pull people in. We are currently working and started the dialogue with the Chamber on a trail system. And we just launched the German Model Apprenticeship Program. So all of that stuff is product that we've tried to create to show value. We've created programs for young professionals, for business women, and for all of the various sectors. And we've also tried to create a sales culture. And we worked really hard on our brand. So for about 10 years now, we've had a sales team, a sales manager, and we have sales meetings, and we do all the things you would do with a typical sales team. We have goals that we have to meet. We hired a member retention specialist about a year ago, retired school counselor. She goes out about 20 hours a week and visits with members and collects information. We have ambassadors who do the greetings at the events, the ribbon cuttings, and welcome new members, but we also have diplomats. They do needs assessment calls quarterly. Every member gets at least 3 needs assessment calls throughout the year. And we're looking to do some more personal touches as well. We do handwritten thank you notes for every new member, for every renewing member, and we hire somebody who writes our thank you notes for us. We also use a really great tool called Hootsuite. If you're not using that for your social media, you can actually time activate for a whole year a shout out to every single member. And we have 3 a day, 7 days a week, and then you only touch it once. You hire an intern, do 2 weeks, get it set up, and you're good to go. And your members are getting shout outs on social media throughout the year. So we also do a lot of focus groups quarterly, and we bring people together just to sort of challenge the process. And on the fun side, we've created things like the Chamber Challenge Game Show, where you can come learn about the Chamber while you're learning about how to create the ROI as a member. So Susan, go ahead and go to the next slide. So all the work that we did is about closing the gap. We started the reaccreditation process in 2006 or 7, and the board didn't really think they wanted to go through accreditation, and we said, well, let's just use it as a process to close the gaps and understand who we are. And that was kind of our guiding tool, were the accreditation sections, if you will. And about halfway through the process, we thought, well, if we're going to give it this much work, we might as well try to go for accreditation. And then we said, well, if we're going to give it this much work, let's position ourselves to try to get the 5 stars as best we can. And that was kind of our guide throughout that. And so as a result of that, we have done a lot of things to build the membership. Chris mentioned the Your Chamber Connection. We've done that twice. The last time we did it a year ago, crossed over the 100,000 mark threshold and brought in about 300 members in the campaign. I would highly recommend it. I can give you more information offline. There's pros and cons. But the way for those types of campaigns to work is absolutely personal touch. You got to go see your members face to face. You got to be in touch. We do about 12 touches per member annually. And that's a combination of personal, phone, written, note cards, social media, things of that nature. So our revenue, you saw the number, started out in the 280 range, 2003, and we closed out last year at the 825,000 number. And we try to focus more on the dollars than we do the numbers. But the cherry on the cake for us obviously was we got the 5-star. Chris wanted me to tell you this story, so I get the phone call from Allie with the U.S. Chamber, and I was in a meeting, and so when I got home, I listened to my message, and I was here alone, listened to the message, and I broke down into tears because it was like 7 years of all this work, and it was the biggest reward to actually hear her say that we had gotten the 5 stars. So it made us want to work even harder. We had for many years filled out our dashboard report with ACCE, and we never had enough criteria to be asked to apply for Chamber of the Year. And we weren't really looking to do that. And lo and behold, 2015, we filled it out and got the phone call, hey, you're eligible to apply. And I was like, are you kidding me? We actually did it. And we went through the process, and then we did receive the Chamber of the Year award. And even if you don't have a desire to do that, I would highly encourage everybody to go through the process, because it's always about what you learn about yourself. You're constantly learning, closing gaps, having these self-awareness moments, and learning maybe what you need to do next. And the biggest thing to know is we all have warts. Nobody's perfect. That's a moment in time for us, but the moment you take the eye off the ball, you go backwards. And so it makes you work even harder and harder and harder at all of those things. So go ahead to the next slide, Susan. So where are we today, and what are we doing? So we're finally to the point now where we're going to fully implement tiered dues. We did a modified tiered dues for our higher-end investors, which pay $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, and $15,000 and then above, back in 2006. And I remember for many years thinking, okay, we've got these higher level investors, we're delivering the value, you know, I want to have 50. That was my goal for like 6 years. Well, about a year and a half ago, we crossed the 50 mark. We now have 55 of those enhanced investors, and we are now converting all of our members to that next, to a tiered process. And so that gets into putting them all into your 4 segments, and where I talked about needs-driven and mission-focused in the beginning, this is also about needs-driven, but pairing up the needs with the quadrant with where a member goes and knowing where to spend your time. That's where we're going in the future. And again, more personal, more customizable. What problem can we solve? The question we ask our members is, tell me who your perfect customer is, and let me help you find those perfect customers. So we're trying to teach staff a little bit on how to be coaches in the process with talking to the members, and then obviously innovate everything you do. Exit surveys are a great way to collect information. We're going to start giving our ambassadors a book of business. We're going to take the whole membership, divide it by the number of ambassadors, and that becomes their book of business they have to work on and cultivate relationships with all year. And now finally, the most important thing is be willing to blow things up. That's the phrase we're using right now. We're getting ready to blow a whole lot of stuff up. The question that we've asked for years, and it came up again last week, is if the chamber went away, what would happen? And you got to have the courage to ask that question. Kill the sacred cow, try some new things, and along the way, because you're never done, never forget to pause and celebrate. That's very important. Celebrate with your members, because they're the ones that make the success. Find their stories, tell their stories. And then in closing, know who you are, do your data, know your research, know what your members want, build that plan, because without a plan, what does it say? With plan to fail, you fail to plan. The plan drives everything, the mission, the needs. Throw away the box, be creative, be innovative, don't be afraid to take risks. Again, you've got the meat, focus on the meat, have the best darn meat you can have, but then make that meat have the best flavor and the best sizzle and the best aroma you can possibly want. And feel comfortable to get uncomfortable. And I remind myself of that constantly, because the moment I get comfortable is the moment that we take our eye off the ball. And one of my favorite sayings is, you're never sitting still. You're either going forward or you're going backwards. But there is no such thing as just being still. So I encourage you to not be still, and to embrace, whatever it is you need to embrace, and have fun with it, but have the systems and all to back it up as well. So Susan, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robert.
Thanks, Candace. Thank you, everyone. I think Candace did a great job, so thank you so much. For me, my story might be a little bit different, and I actually owe where I'm at today much gratitude to Chris and Mick at ACCE. As you heard when I was introduced, I had a 4 different chambers, this being my 4th one of being here. And my last chamber, as I was ready to make a move, ACCE was instrumental in helping me land where I am. So that said, let me just tell you a little bit about where we are and what we've done that's made us somewhat successful in what we're doing. I came on board in October of 2013. Like any of us, when we took over our first chamber or we've moved to another chamber, you're excited to be immersed into a new community and really, hit the ground running. That I did. I definitely hit the ground running. I got here in October 13, and literally the first week or so that I came in, I inherited a team of 3 staff, and my predecessor had been here about 16 years and retired. Great guy. And when he retired, physically was in October of 13, but in paper, if you just look at our numbers, he had retired probably 3 years before that. Now, that said, he did an amazing job, and he definitely left some foundational key things that help us to build upon today. But in that first week that I got here, I said to him, hey, can we meet at the office? We planned about a week crossover, and we planned to meet. And the day that we met, he didn't show up, and I stood outside, locked out of the office for probably 2-3 hours. Didn't know whether to come, didn't know what was going on, sort of thing. Finally got a hold of him. He was out on the golf course. Had forgot. Came over. Anyway, we met that day a little bit, came back the next day, and we had planned that he was going to take me around and introduce me to community leaders to make some introductions. Sad part is we didn't meet one community leader. He took me around and showed me memory lane, what was, what wasn't. I'm driving in a car with essentially a perfect stranger in a city I really know nothing about, and thinking to myself, holy crap. I'm in trouble. So he moves on. I come into the office. I begin to work with the team. For the first, I would say, few weeks, the phones didn't ring. And the only time our phone rang was one of the ladies that worked for me would be her husband to call and find out what was for dinner. During that first month and the month prior, I think if we had 1, maybe 2 members join, that was pretty much it. So I'd gone home that first week thinking, oh no, I made a mistake. What am I going to do? And I've always been a kind of a challenge. When the challenge meets me, I'm going to take it on. So for the next few months, October, November, and December, I really dove in and had gone through the what we were doing, what was working, what wasn't working, trying to figure out what was up. And the interesting thing was the onset. When I met with the hiring committee and the board, I didn't get that same feeling that kind of things were the way they were. And also, my current chair was MIA for the first 3 months I got here. So I really was questioning a lot of things about this new community and this new chamber. But that said, I knew what needed to be done. I'd worked in some other dynamic chambers, and I knew exactly what needed to be done. So we went through, did an inventory assessment, looked at what we were doing, not doing. And I'll tell you, we hit the ground running in 2014, and we literally, I think, set shockwaves through in a good way, not necessarily a bad way. 2015, 16, 17 have been record breakers for us, and we've just remained very determined and confident. A couple of things, and Susie, you can advance the slide. One of the things I did is I put together for our board real quick, and this was a new member recap, and they really hadn't gotten this information, and I basically just broke it down by quarter, how many members had signed up over the quarter. Now, I added the 14 column because I put this together for them in 14, but I wanted them to be able to start to see trends of what was going on, and they were not getting this information presented in this manner. And while we are in Arizona and there was a downturn in the economy, certainly we can blame some of that, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that's when our members need us the most. When things are going well, they sometimes forget about us. When things are tough, they got to get back to the basics, and that's when our resources and products come into play. So this was just a recap. They had never really seen something like this and began to become eye-opening for our board. And Susie, you can go to the next slide. This is our drop. And as you can see, it was a complete reverse of what the join looked like. Our drops were just going through the roof. I mean, they were running out the back door. We were not bringing anyone in the front door. And obviously you can see, but as we go into 14, we were able to kind of stabilize that and work to mitigate as that run was going out the door. We cleaned up the database. At the end of 2013, December 31st, or say January 1st of 2014, true cleanup of our database, we had 485 active members. And I think that was alarming to some because they really didn't know what we had. So again, this was another eye-opener for our group here to understand. You can go to the next slide, Susan. So here's a 7-year recap on our membership. And for example, 2017 is only 1 month in for the quarter, but you're able to see the trajectory of our growth. Year over year, since I got here in 14, we've been welcoming 200 plus members every year. And again, this was to help illustrate to the board, some people are not number people, some people are not visual people, so we present it in both ways with the dollars and cents. And again, this is where we should be. What I basically told our board is, if you have the reverse of this with drops, then you should sound the alarm as our board, which they really hadn't done before. If they are seeing this type of trajectory, then they're going to see things that are going well. Or actually, our current chair of the board, every time she would introduce and say things to folks, she'd introduce me, and my last name is Height, and she'd say, dear so-and-so, or, meet Robert Height. He's taken our chamber to new heights. So it was kind of a interesting way to present my last name into what our success had been. You can go to the next slide as well, Susan. So what did we do? Essentially, and when I say we, it really was me. I had 2 staff members who had been here 25 plus years, did not have the technical aptitude that we needed to move the organization forward at that time, and 1 person who was about to leave because her husband was taking a new job back in DC. So really, I was in quite a situation, almost panic mode. I talked to everyone. I went out and visited with our past chairs of the board, our current board members, dropped members, existing members, community. I literally talked to everyone. What do you like about the chamber? What don't you like? What have we done well? What are we falling short on? And essentially, we hadn't really upset anyone. They just said, you're mute. You don't stand for business. You don't represent business. Occasionally, you'll have a great event. Nothing really exciting going on. So the good in that was I felt, well, we don't have a lot of to overcome of, kind of battle scars. We just stopped working. And it was evident in the phone. So I immediately worked through our city partners and pulled a list of the number of businesses in our community. There's over 13,000 within the Glendale area that have business license. So as I looked at that list, it's overwhelming. There's no way I can tackle 13,000 off the bat. So I parsed it back down, and we ended up that we had 5,500 brick and mortar businesses and about 2,000 that I'll say other. And those others would be maybe consultants or people who have a business license that are home-based, or maybe some independent contractors, that sort of thing. So what we ended up with is really a more manageable, workable list of about just over 7,000 members to begin from. And look at that. What we did then is we started personalizing everything we did. I went to the board in 2013. This organization had lost $75,000 year end. I went to the board to present a 2014 budget with about an $85,000 increase in expense, but then also a match to that in terms of revenue. And that was aggressive, and it was to bring on new people, to invest in ourselves. We hadn't done that. Surprisingly, they bought into it, and they brought in the vision, and they supported it, and we made it work. We added a new team. We changed our process. I think what was pivotal for us also in that first few months of 2014 is we began to have a voice. We began to represent business. We launched the Public Policy Council. We stood up and fought our city against a sales tax increase, something we had never done before. We had typically cowered down to our city and listened to what they told us to do and how to do it. When we were talking to folks, we had as a dues model, we have an employee-based formula, and then we have an investor level, so kind of a hybrid model, which seems to work for our community. I know all of us are a little bit different, but for us, for the employee base, it seems to work. But on the employee base, and those numbers that I presented were strictly on employee base, not our investor level. The big thing that I heard over and over from members were members who had been with us 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. They had an auto increase that just lived on and on and on. And so some of them were in essence paying 2 and 3 times what their really rate was. So what we did is we stopped that auto increase, and what essentially work with members. We certainly couldn't just flip the switch and dial back everyone's dues, but what we did is through conversation began to explain where we were, what happened. Many of them were really understanding, and we worked to reset folks and try to get more fairness, or say, since you're at this level, perhaps we can do some other things with those funds and put them in certain places. So we began to maximize their investment with us in a different level. But that was huge on the auto increase that we had. Everything that we pretty much had, again, the team that we had in place, as I said, was not tech savvy, so a lot of our stuff was outsourced. I don't know about those of you, and I know for some it does work. For me, I'm maybe a little bit more neurotic, control freak, hands-on. I had to forget that in-house. I couldn't even answer a financial question if our board asked us in the first 30 days because we didn't even have access to it. So we hired an individual. He came on board, and we brought all that stuff in-house because that was one of the board's biggest complaints is we don't know the numbers. Do we make money? What are the join amounts? What are the drop amounts? There was a lot of things we couldn't do. So we worked to kind of rebuild the business, if you will, in our approach. One of the unique things about what we've put in our team here is we personalize literally everything. People, there's that emotional aspect of them buying and renewing and investing with the chamber. We added the personal touch. Some of that is, I can't tell you how many note cards go out of here in a given day. Every single person in this office is writing note cards. In 13, we were basically, say, 3.5 staff. Today, we're at 8. Everybody's writing note cards. Everyone's doing visits with members. You know, we have, you know, we're listening to members. We're finding out when their anniversaries were, when there's some milestone for them, and we're trying to capitalize that, whether it's through our communications or sending something out. As I mentioned earlier, and in that graph, it showed what our join rate was. And it just shows that on that last bullet there, we brought in over 200 members each year, and that kind of just shows a snapshot of what we've done. And part of it was by basically dissecting our community. Our community is, if you took the letter L and flipped it so it was backwards, that's the shape of our community. And we have various districts broken down by council. So we literally started working through those districts and finding out where the clusters of members were, where they weren't, who was a member, who wasn't a member, and just every day began to call upon and reach out to those folks in terms of the attraction to get our numbers to what we felt should have been a much more sustainable number for our community. You can go to the next slide, Susan. Our program of work, we revamped pretty much everything we had to do. It was overwhelming. Our events were, in a lack of a better words, embarrassing. I went to my first after hours. If there was 25 people there, including the 3 of us from the chamber staff, that was a lot. It was not what I was used to coming from my other chambers. So literally I couldn't stop and pick them all apart. So we literally went one by one by one and figured out what we needed to do. But at the same time, identifying of those events, which ones were revenue driven, meaning after our expenses, we needed to drive a subset of revenue back, and what ones we could flatline, meaning we were just looking to cover our hard costs. And then we began to share that information in conversation with our members because some of them felt squeezed. They felt that they basically were writing a check to subsidize or keep us afloat as opposed to writing a check that went into an investment or it mattered or was making a difference in our program of work. So every event that we've done since 14 has been a record breaker in terms of attendance, in terms of net profitability back to the chamber, to the point that, we do 100 plus programs and events a year, and it's just completely maximized. For example, we had a weekly breakfast, maybe 5 people, 6 people, 7 if we were lucky. Just a dismal failure, and it was, people felt excluded. It wasn't, they didn't feel inclusive or that they were welcomed. Today, we have that same weekly breakfast, 70, 75 people. Our mayor is there every Wednesday, other community leaders, our chair of the board is there. So basically, we had to just blow everything up and work through it. We didn't necessarily throw a lot out. There were certain things that were pillars in what we had done, and that was kind of supported by our chamber, but we certainly had to do our fair share of work on that. As I mentioned, in January, we created a Public Policy Council 14. That was an interest of our board. We moved quickly. With our Public Policy Council, we then endorsed candidates in 2015, and we just, in this first quarter, the board passed our creating a PAC. it took us a couple of years to do that, but with every single one of those, we had a unanimous vote from our board of directors. There wasn't one person that abstained or one person that took a back seat, with the exception of our elected official and city manager who serves on our board. They had to abstain for natural reasons as ex officio. But other than that, everything else passed unanimously. That also put us on the map. We had people, businesses in the community reaching out to us to say the fact that the chamber is going to monitor the halls of government makes a difference. It matters. How do I help you? What can I do to take my support of the chamber to a new level? So that's opened up new kind of found funding that we otherwise did not have from members. And not just into the contribution of the PAC, but more so on the membership side. We had people who came in to join just because. We became what I would say what we're called in the metro area, and we hear this over and over, Glendale Chamber is the IT chamber. We have 6 other chambers just around me to the west, and then I have the Phoenix Chamber just to the right of me, and they all do great work in their own communities, but we literally have become what people have dubbed as the IT chamber in the West Valley of Phoenix. We started focusing our business retention expansion efforts and our economic development, something we really hadn't focused on before. We did, but we really were not immersed into it. What we were finding is there was a lot of discontent from the business community with our city on process, things like that. So now we're pivotal in working hand in hand with our city folks in addressing issues. It could be so much as yesterday it was a pothole. There was something obstructing a roadway. And what we're doing is we're making things happen quickly, where ordinarily it would get put in queue and that sort of thing. So we're working to get some wins to regain and continue to gain the confidence of our business community of how the chamber and the government, our local government, works. So it's making a huge difference. Sadly to say, when I got here, we had no committees. We had our board of directors, and that was it. I don't know where they all were. Now, today, we have a number of committees, just like all the rest of us, whether it's an ambassador or we have a Luke Air Force Base here, so we have a military veteran affairs, a marketing committee, public policy. So you name it, we have those committees. What we've found is they have begun driving program and meaning and value back to our chamber that we otherwise didn't have, creating this synergy and energy into it. As we've grown as a chamber, I've had to develop our team. Obviously, I've been in the chamber world for a number of years and been fortunate to take advantage of calls like this and other training and things like that, but our team necessarily hasn't. So we've worked hard to incorporate that into our plan going forward, so that we have our team who can begin to take advantage of development in the chamber profession. And we also began engaging our community in the sense that for a while, the perception was it was all about us. It was all about give me at the chamber. Everybody thought we were a cash grab. And that was the perception out there. So we had to begin to show people that we have a heart. We want to be immersed in this community. Your business matters. Your nonprofit matters. Your cause does matter to us. So we began to focus a little bit more on the way we work with our different community groups, businesses, leaders, that sort of thing. Next slide, Susan. So our retention, the activation process comes in, it can be as mundane as we make it. We try to make it a little bit more interesting in the sense that, retention is every single person's job in this organization, not just one. When they come on board, it depends on how they come on board, whether one of our directors of investor relations have gone out. I have 3 people who do nothing but member acquisition and retention every single day. So they could meet with them in their business. They might meet with them here. We might take a photograph with them. We walk them around. We'll introduce them to the team. The big thing is they're excited. We want to capitalize on that. We immerse them into the chamber. Thank you. We post right away that they've just joined the chamber. They're on Facebook. Kind of what was said earlier in terms of Hootsuite, which is another resource where you can keep that going in and throughout the year. Like many of us, we have our ambassador who does a call, visit, invites to an event. We have a number of targeted emails we send specifically to first-year members. We throw a lot at them in the orientation process of here's all the great things we do. Maybe some stuff resonates, a lot doesn't. So we have some targeted e-blasts that go specifically to first-year members that say, as a new member, or now that you've been with us a few months, here are a few things don't forget about, because it is overwhelming and we recognize that we throw a lot at them, or they only have heard a very small percentage of it. The personal connection with our chamber team and key volunteers, I'm proud to say that when I go to our events, and I don't miss one thing that we do, or our team goes, there is not a member that we don't know or we don't leave there knowing, or a guest. And that takes some work. Everybody gets known. There's no clique, there's no wallflower. They're not left to kind of fend for themselves. And our key volunteers take on that same role with us. And I've been a part of other chambers where I'm not saying that it didn't happen, but not to the level that we do it today. We take great pride in that we know every single face at our event. Then we start to determine what type of member they'll be. Why did they join? Are they a corporate member? Are they in medical? Are they a retail shop, a restaurant? Are they a hotel? What was the purpose of them joining? And so we can start to clump them. And Kyle Sexton's done some great stuff with giving you quadrants in our industry to kind of look at. So we start to look at where these people fit so we can figure out how best to communicate with them, because like all of us, we have several members in all of our rosters that really don't care to engage. Listening to our members has been really vital. There's so much if we just zip it and listen. We've learned so much from these folks of how to engage them and talk to them. The techniques when calling past due members, one of the things that we've done is we've segregated our entire membership roster, so we're about 1,200 members now. And it's divided up by team member, and then every team member has a process to go through, and basically we've highlighted it where they're either red, yellow, or green. And green means they're good as gold in our minds. We know them. We have a wonderful rapport. They're going to renew. We don't foresee any problems. Now, something could occur. Yellow is maybe where we got a little bit of work to do, and then red means we don't know. They don't know us, and we don't know them in terms of that renewal. They don't come to an event. We haven't quite figured it out. So that's our work in progress, where anybody who's a red, we want to move them into a yellow. So pretty easy process of red, yellow, green. We also segregate time out that myself and our Director of Investor Relations team, we work as a team together on retention. So we have dedicated time twice a month that we block off for about 2.5 hours that we do nothing but work on retention as a team, because sometimes the power of it's not me, Robert, but sometimes it's the title or the email that comes from me that sparks a response has had a huge impact. So we work with that. And when they tell us no, every single time they tell us no, we ask them, basically we ask them this one question, and it goes like this: I'm sorry we won't be working together, but I hope we have a chance to in the near future. Just as you're always working to strive and improve your services to your clients, so is our chamber. What advice would you give me for next time to make our services programs more attractive to you? And the response we get is telling, and it helps us to figure out what we're not doing or what we are doing. You can go to the next slide, Susan. In a nutshell, that pretty much wraps it up for me. What I will say is it's been a lot of work, and it's hard work. It's not physically work like we're doing construction or we're out building a high-rise building, but the constant follow-up, follow-through, connections with the members, it's been amazing. But the reward has been evident in our success and our numbers in terms of the engagement that we've seen with our members, simply by showing up, showing that we have a heart, listening, trying to overcome their goals and not make it just about us. And that's been part of our secret ingredient.
Well, thanks so much, Robert, and thanks so much, Candace. That was great information. We really appreciate it. Very great work, very inspiring. And we are now going to be able to take a few questions. We have a few minutes left, maybe 1, 2, 3 minutes, something like that. So, Mr. Mead, you take a few questions?
Sure. And sorry if I talk a little quickly. This is Efren Franco, who asks, when will a new Shapiro study be done? That's the study that shows how consumers seem to prefer Chamber of Commerce members. And hundreds of chambers have used that study. We've done it twice in the past. It's very possible we'll have it done by the end of this year. If not, first part of next year. Beth Shapiro has retired, but there are other companies that do something similar. That Facebook shout-out program.
There's a question about the Facebook shout-out. That may be Hootsuite. Candace mentioned that, and later also Robert did as well. And we had a couple questions on that.
And we will have a download PowerPoint. Let's see.
The red, yellow, and green categories. Robert, can you review the red, yellow, and green categories quickly?
Sure. Essentially what we did is we pulled our membership roster in its entirety. We sat down as a team. It was a long process, went through, okay, ABC company, who knows them? How do we feel about them? You know, naturally the ones that are green are the people that we know the best, the most. The yellow, well, maybe they've been with us a little while. We don't have that same warm fuzzy with them, but we want to work to move them into what we're calling that green bucket. And then the red are, again, we have several members who have been longtime members, but we really don't know why, or we really don't have that personal connection. So our goal is to work and target those folks in a different manner to not bombard them, but figure out what makes them tick and why they find value in the chamber, so that hopefully we can understand that to get them into what we would then code as a green.
Thanks, Robert. Here's another question to you. This is from Rebecca Wood. You spoke a lot about new sales. What are your retention rates like, both for the number of members and for the amount of revenues that you get?
So we're in the high 90s in terms of our retention rate for the last few years. Last year, I think we were at 96 or 97%. I'd have to go back and look, but either way, it's in the same ballpark. So our retention has been very strong.
That's impressive. Those are big numbers for a community that size. Are you willing to share your close that you mentioned for the non-renewing people?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I can send that to Susan, and then I don't know how she can put that out or put that up.
Yeah, I can post that probably or send it out. Thanks, Robert.
No problem.
And I think that's all the questions we have right now. If you all think about this and have more questions and want to contact Candace or Robert directly, or Chris or me, please feel free to do so. Our contact information is on that last slide, and any of us would be happy to talk to you. Just a reminder that the webinar is being recorded. I'll post the webinar on our ACCE webinar page. It has lots of great webinars on it. You can get there by going to the ACCE website, www.acce.org, going to the ACCE webinar page, click on professional development, hover over ACCE University Online, and click on A to Z webinars. So it will be there no later than Monday. I will also include the presentation as well, so it'll be right there. And I will include a link to Chris's magazine article and any other resources I can think of that will help you. And our next webinar, ACCE University webinar, is going to be next Thursday, May 18th. It's the final webinar of our 2016 Chamber of the Year Award Winner Series by the Association of Washington Business President and CEO, Chris Johnson. He'll discuss the Grassroots Alliance, which unites the State Chamber of Commerce and its local chamber counterparts. So we hope you can join this webinar to learn more about this effort, which represents a long-term commitment from AWB and its partners to work together on important policy issues. So thank you again to Candace and Robert and to Chris for your presentations, and to everyone for your participation and interest. Wish you all a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.